people from other provinces, from Gauteng, from Western Cape province, and we have also amongst us people from the municipal library, the local municipal libraries, and we have DUT academics, and we have library staff from DUT who aren't academics, and library staff from DUT who are academics. And I want to say a real good morning to each and every one of you. Thank you for joining us for this session. Before I introduce our Vice Chancellor, just some housekeeping things. The loo, if you go out the door at the back, that door will remain open for the duration of the session. If you go out, the restrooms, toilets, whatever you want to call them, down the steps as you go out of the building, the male and female is there. That's a very important part. The other thing is in your packs that you were given, sometimes we don't look in these packs until we get out. There's a little A5 notice that gives you the password and the username for the Wi-Fi, the DUT Wi-Fi. We have Wi-Fi access here today, and on that little sheet is the Wi-Fi access details. But also on that sheet you will find that we are doing a live streaming of our two keynote presentations, the one today and the one tomorrow. We have received consent from the speakers to be live streamed through the DUT library. If you go into the DUT library website, you can tell your friends, those who aren't here, you can tell them to join in. DUT library on the YouTube channel. You will then be able to access the live stream of today's events. So that's that. The other thing in your pack is a little evaluation form, which is from time to time, if you can just put some notes in there for us, just to give feedback so that your feedback can be used to improve the session and improve this kind of initiative next year. And then, of course, you have the program for the day. So why are we gathered here today? This week is International Open Access Week, and this program has been drawn up as a joint venture between the e-learning project, which is headed by Professor Graham Stewart, and the library, the DUT library. I think Segrin was part of the key drivers of this particular day. The themes of the symposium are twofold. One, open access, and the second theme is open educational resources. I won't tell you much about them because I'm sure the speakers are going to share much more about it. However, the open access strand of the conference, the organizers hope that it would help us to explore current thinking and practice with regards to research publications, especially those in the new arena of open access publication. And then the second strand of open educational resources would be helping us to unpack the concept of open educational resources and explore similarities with open access. Now, higher education is well known for having a language of its own with all its acronyms. So there's OA and OER and a whole lot of other acronyms that are going to be used today. But let's hope that you will feel very comfortable and you'll be able to join in with us and participate in this wonderful day, 2 days that we have ahead of us. So I'd like to introduce Professor Ahmed Bauer, our Vice Chancellor, and Professor, I know technology is close to his heart in terms of the e-learning project that we have at DUT. Is really one of the projects that he really shows a keen interest in, and he has the vision for DUT in terms of our students having access to technology in their learning spaces, no matter where they could be. So I'm not going to say very much more, except to say, let's give a round of applause for welcome, Professor.
morning, everybody. And I just want to say a really special welcome to Professor Cherevich and Professor Emily. And I've known them both for a while, especially Alan. Alan and I go back a long way. And we had fights over open access before, and I'm sure we'll have some in the future. But mostly we kind of agreed with each other. And also just a whole range of people that I've worked with before from UKZN and University previously. Welcome to you all, and of course welcome to students and staff here at DUT. It's been years, I think, in terms of e-learning and so on at DUT, and I want to just at this point just say that it was such a pleasure for me to learn two things when I first arrived here. One was the work that EdTech was doing, and just working with staff and trying to get people enthused and so on. And the others, just looking at the way students were already at that stage beginning to use technology, just in their own ways, and not because of the university, but even despite the university, kind of really, beginning to use websites for learning and using Facebook and so on. I got this wonderful story that I won't repeat here again about a student who kind of was communicating with students all around the world, like on Facebook, about what she was doing at DUT and so on. So having started there, and then getting Grant Stewart to take on the project has really been a seminal kind of. It was a seminal kind of point, if you like, in the sort of building coherence, cohesion, and so on. I don't want to give you the impression that everything is just, proceeding smoothly. It's not like that at all. But if it was like that, I'd be very worried. But we're making progress, and I think that's great. We have to keep reminding ourselves that DUT isn't a rich institution; we're a poor institution. But this is a strategic trust, and we've done really well, I think, in getting to where we are. And I think that more than anything else, it's very like this, they tell us that we're on the right path, and that because this this issue of open access is a critical issue. I have to start by saying there's a disclaimer. I mean, I'm not an expert in this area, so please don't expect me to give you some serious pronouncements about it and so on. So I'm just really going to use this as an opportunity to put forward some thoughts and for us to kind of think about open access in a slightly broader way than we would normally think about it. The first point I thought I'd make is that the discussion of open learning has to be a multi-layered discussion. It's not just about kind of open learning and open access and learning, e-learning. So that's a part of the story, and it's a very important part of the story. And it is, but actually, it's more than just a part of the story. It's a key element of the story. So, and of course, we can have a whole conference. We can have 5 days of presentations on that topic. The relationship between e-learning and open access. So that's clearly one level at which we, as a university, that's kind of migrating to kind of a mixed kind of learning enterprise. That is obviously one area in which we have to spend time thinking about how open access might also be linked to development, right? And now, I know that sounds like kind of a fairly major, big step. What does that mean? Well, I think it would be clear to many of us, that the whole issue around development is very closely linked to the extent to which a society is a learning society. I don't mean that everybody should be high education, but if you want to produce a society that is innovative, where there's an expansion in social entrepreneurship, where people are engaged in the democracy and so on, then you have to have a situation where the majority of people in that society are actually in the process of learning some kind of learning. It's not about what goes into the head, it's about what happens to the head when you learn, right? And it's about the feeling that comes from learning. The ability to draw from yourself the inspiration that comes from the use of the mind and so on. That sounds a bit crazy, but but I think that that's true. We have this organization in Peter Mansfield, which is called MIDI, the Innovation and Development Institute. And one of the projects that we are thinking about, I'm on the board of it. One of the projects that we are thinking about there in Peter Mansfield is how to transform Peter Mansfield into a learning city. Now, of course, a part of that story is the schools. It has a very rich, Peter Mansfield has had, I'm sure you know, Peter Mansfield has a very rich history of excellent schooling. It also has a history of poor schooling, so how do you bring those to bear on each other? But there's something else, which is universities, of course. And then, of course, there's the FET College, University College, all that jazz. But that's not what I'm really talking about. What I'm talking about is how do we try and ensure that we create the platforms in Peter Mansfield that would allow people who are looking at Unilever to begin to learn, to begin to participate in the learning process. And again, I want to emphasize, it isn't simply about access to higher education. It's about getting people into the learning, into a learning enterprise. And I think there's a very close relationship between development. When I speak about development, it's not just economic development, it's development in the broad sense. So that's the second kind of level, if you like, or the layer that we have to discuss when we think about open access. Because, if we don't galvanize the resources that we have for this kind of learning, it's just not going to happen. So for me, there's like a deep ideological thing there, which I want to come back to this time. The third level, is the issue of open access and human rights. I think that we all have to stand in awe of Emerson, and whether you like him or not, or whether you think he's like crazy, you have to stand in awe of him. Here's somebody who's like thought that he had a really serious role to play in linking access to information to broad publics. When I say publics, I mean many publics, including governments. And I think that is just the tip of the iceberg, because we have to start posing this question, and it is being posed. What's the relationship between open access and human rights? To what extent is open access a human right? And to what extent can we think of open access as contributing to building a culture of human rights? Those are really, those are seminal things, very powerful things, because that kind of grounds the discussion about open access in something that's very fundamental. We might conclude actually that there's no relationship. I'd be very surprised if we arrive there. But I think we have to have that discussion to determine that relationship. Next level is the relationship between open access and social justice. See, we have a real challenge in South Africa, right? We all know that irrespective of how strong your culture of human rights is, that doesn't guarantee social justice. And I think that open access has a huge role to play in social justice. On the one hand, it's about justice in terms of our socio-political background, our history, and so on, the right to access to information of all kinds, but in particular, kind of literature and history. And the journals. And none of the articles in those journals were peer reviewed. So you have to step back and ask yourself, how much of this is going on? To what extent is the peer review mechanism being undermined by capitalism? And I'm not trying to put forward this impression that actually all peer reviewing is obviously we need peer review. The question is, how do we think about it? Is it simply about the fact that the existing models of peer review and so on, and the existing models of publication are the only ones that we can live with? So why did Merck do that? Well, Merck and Elsevier wanted to give the impression that those journal articles, those articles that appeared in those journals, were peer reviewed. Well, they weren't. In fact, all the articles in those journals were written by staff members of Merck. So, I think it's hosting me, I'm not sure. I have to be careful about it. It has just been, has just had its kind of little blast because an author, which was 98% plagiarized, and it wasn't done. So, by the way, it's on the DHET list. So even DUT members and staff are publishing in that journal. So, members of DUT have parties. So, now, there's something else. See, I work in this area of particle physics, but I work in a particular area in particle physics, like everybody else does. They work in their areas. Only, I don't know, 100 of us or something around the world working in this area. When I submitted the article to physical review A and B or C, it goes to one of those 100 people. We know each other. We've met each other over and over again. Some of us are in favor, some of us are out of favor. If you are James Sterling, who was my supervisor, the articles get published very quickly. I'm not suggesting that James's work isn't good. James' work is very good. But if Tobin and Lobo from UKZN or from DUT sends in an article, it will take a long time for that thing to be published. It will go to and fro and so on. So we have to, in the South African context, it's even worse. Because in the South African context, we have 23 universities. Well, now I say we have 23.2, right? 23.2 universities. And if you look at the research community, it's very small. If you look at the research community, each discipline is very small. So the big question is, just should we not be asking questions about the traditional peer review mechanisms? I've got other stories that I can tell you that. Needless to say, the other side of this whole debate is the ideas that have emerged, for example, in biological sciences at Berkeley. And now, of course, Berkeley has its own open access system. It subsidizes people who are publishing open access. By the way, Berkeley, for whatever one might say about it, is one of the world's top public universities. Biological sciences at Berkeley refused to publish in the traditional journals. They decided that they were going to have an open access journal. That's now become a Berkeley kind of phenomenon. And there's a whole system in place to facilitate it. What's the idea? The idea is simply the following. That is that you put something on there, and everybody in the community working in that area looks at that article. And you get feedback. And there's a peer review mechanism that takes place. In physics, There's very similar thing happens. There's the archive database. When you submit an article to the archive database, it goes in there, and sometimes within hours, right, you get people start writing in and saying, "Sorry, but we've done this already," or "Excuse me, but how did you get that result? But we've tried this. Have you tried this test to see if that works?" So there's that kind of peer review. I think what I'm suggesting is that we can't just simply assume that we need to think about peer review in the traditional sense that peer review takes place. And by the way, peer review isn't something that's centuries old, right? So it's something that came into place post Second World War. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And I'm just going to say, see, when the Reverend Dr. Tim says, "Good morning, everybody, and let's be present," I have to think about what that means. Right? But yeah, I think that's. I think that I think that this is a wonderful opportunity for us to think about something that's really important. I hope very much that at the end of today and tomorrow that we'll begin to see how DUT can take up the issue of open access more vigorously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Professor. Yes, Prof. I think that whole issue of mindfulness, I had an interesting discussion with our colleague from Skype about being present in the now. And actually, many of us sitting here, I'm sure if you just, for a few minutes, there's lots of other thoughts that are racing through your mind at the moment and saying, okay, I wish you can get on because we want to hear Laura speak. And there's many other thoughts that are going through your mind. So how present are you actually when you are physically there? And I think for me, some of those issues around access to information are important. Thanks, Prof. Bauer, for highlighting. I think for me, the link between technology and the human being and helping us to understand that we must be mindful of the human issues around social justice, around various other areas of our lives where human rights and how we can quite easily lose the plot when we focus only on the technology side, and we need to start looking at where are we going from the human side. So having said that, I would like to call on Professor Graham Stewart to introduce our keynote speaker, Laura Chenovich. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure this morning to introduce Professor Laura Chenovich to you. Dr. Chenovich is a scholar, a strategist, and educator, and has worked in the field of educational technology at the University of Cape Town for over a decade. Working in teacher training and publishing in Zimbabwe and South Africa, and she is the director of UCT's Center for Innovation, Learning and Teaching. Until recently, she headed the university's initiative to open up its knowledge resources to all with internet connectivity and engage in the open education agenda from a Southern perspective, Open UCT. Her research interests include scholars and students' digitally mediated practices and social and digital inclusion in a changing higher education environment. She blogs from time to time, and I'm sure we'll give you her URL later on, and tweets at Chen. Prof. Chenovich is a leading authority in ICT and higher education in this country, and it's an honor and a delight to have you with us today. Prof. Chenovich.
Thank you very much. I'm the left-leg glasses now. Thanks very much. And thank you very much for inviting me to this fabulous event and program. Graham, you did give me an impossible brief. Graham kept sending me emails saying, and don't forget to talk about this. And then phoning me and saying, and also that. And then when we met at a talk last week in Pretoria, he said, and can you do part of that talk too? So if my talk is a little bit, if you start wondering about the logic, you'll have to blame Graham. And thanks very much to Prof. Bauer for the fantastic introduction. I think those were really important points, and they were points that I had to leave out of this talk. So it really works brilliantly. That I'm going to be focusing on the environment in general, and then on open education resources in particular, as I was requested. But I am hoping that we'll have some good discussion as issues arise. So I can't see my talk on the screen, so I have to look there. Can we change it? Wait, sorry. It means I'm going to be doing this thing, but forgive me. Now we are not moving at all. Don't you love technology?
Brilliant. It needs the human element to keep moving.
Let's go next one. Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay, while we're waiting for the technology to come back on, I would encourage you to grab maybe a cup of coffee if you haven't had some coffee at the back. Also to say that the air conditioner, if you feel that the air conditioner is not very comfortable, it's too cold for you, can you just indicate, and then we've got someone who will control it for us. Because I know this room, the temperature tends to vary a little bit. It's fine. It's not fine, it's too cold. Is it too cold? Yeah. No, sorry, actually. You fall to sleep. Yes. Okay, thanks everybody. We're ready to start. Thank you.
With people standing over you, that's pretty intense. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to make a couple of introductory comments about the technology. Not because I'm a techno-determinist and not because I think that technology causes these changes, but because it really does afford some extraordinary possibilities. And, you know, this is nothing new. Adam Smith was talking about the affordances of technology a long time ago, about the fact that they introduced divisions of labor, specializations, and economies of scale. That in itself is not new. But what is new is the affordances of the new technologies, the new media, or the new ICTs. And I have found Manovich's work just incredibly illuminating and helpful to describe what those characteristics are. What is it that makes all of this possible? And these are, I mean, this is the poor man, he writes a whole book and I put it into one slide. But I just think it's very helpful to consider that the first thing is numerical representation, that objects exist as data. And immediately of what's going on in the learning and analytics and so on, but the fact that we are data and everything we do online becomes data, so it's quite profound. The fact that data online is modular is of course incredibly important in terms of granularization, chunking, different sizes and different possibilities, things being broken up and broken down. The fact that automation is fundamental, and I know in the learning space, this of course is the big wish, the holy grail, the belief that we can have this adaptive learning space and we can automate it and then we can get rid of all of these pesky costs called lecturers. And that's a fundamental consideration. And then the fact that new media objects are variable. And this is a nightmare for librarians. Are there any librarians in the room? Those final versions are becoming less and less likely in an age of dynamic changing content. Very important. And then this notion of transcoding, which is one that fascinates me, how it changes the way we understand ourselves. Quite a complex issue, one we won't be addressing particularly today, but I think it has actually influenced society in general. So, what's going on in the teaching and learning environment as a result of these affordances? Well, we know what a teaching and we know how it works in a teaching and learning environment. We have a timetable. We have a place where we have the timetable. We have fabulous teachers. These are winners of the Distinguished Teacher Award at UCT. We have books. And we have assessment and evaluation and graduation. That's how it works. And it comes all packaged up together. It's a familiar, single, linked deal. But what new technologies do so well is disaggregate them. And I'm talking about quite high level disaggregation here. The more that we pick and unpick, the more disaggregated it can get. But with the focus on particularly content today, I'm going to specifically talk about that. But let me just run through what's happening in some of those spaces as a result. Not as a result, as an engagement. I think it's a two-way thing. So the first thing is that the notion of place and the role that place plays in learning and meaning making is replaced by platforms. So platforms cease to be simply tools. They become the holders of possibility in terms of what is possible in those environments. So the notion of a learning environment ceases to simply be something practical, because what that environment affords, what it shapes, what happens in that environment affects and influences meaning making. And it's also, of course, the space of massive investment, as companies have come to understand that this is increasingly something that universities are going to have to engage with and have to be a part of their worlds. And this is a recent look at the established learning environments. So Blackboard, we're familiar with, the open source Moodle and Sakai, which are becoming much more established. And then a whole range of new players. Canvas, some of you might have encountered, and then of course the MOOC platforms with all their promises of automation and analytics and so on. So what happens in those spaces is not incidental, and there are many different ways of looking at those platforms. Here's one. I'm intrigued by the factors, the considerations, which are being used for analysis. Class size, brandability, analytics, monetization, mobiles, and hosting. So what does that tell you about a particular kind of educational discourse? The interesting thing about platforms is sometimes you find that you buy the platform and you can get free content. So there's an example of content that's available under an open Creative Commons license. But in fact, you are buying the rights to access the platform.